616. 616 will be our first song. Get a little bit of a late start. I'm going to try to get it back to you, back into the lesson. We are able to finally get a live stream going. It's been a struggle for the last 3 or 4 weeks because Facebook likes to tweak their software a lot, and every time they do, well, it kicks folks like us off the live stream. Not good. So, it is a bit embarrassing if I was talking about it, didn't have it going. But I think we got it fixed, found a workaround to get us on. So hopefully we're streaming, and the back of at least a few of you guys' head is being broadcast right now, all the way throughout the world. So I'll be proud of that. There's 616. Let's sing the first line. I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the ransom will shine, I want a gold one, that silver line. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are purest gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a robe and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk the streets that are purest gold. Number 681. 681, that's the newish one we've been working on lately. Verse 681. After the song, unless Carl Ray open this in prayer. 681 in the first and last. We're part of the family that's been born again, part of the family whose love knows no end. For Jesus has saved us and made us His own. Now we're part of the family that's on its way home. And sometimes we laugh together, sometimes we cry, sometimes we share together heartaches and sighs. Sometimes we dream together of how it will be when we all get to heaven, God's family. And the sun go before us, we'll all meet again just inside the city as we enter in. song goes to number 227. That's going to be our song invitation. Number 227. Once you get that mark, go ahead and turn to number 550. That'll be our song for the lesson. 550. When with the Savior we enter the glory land, won't it be wonderful there? Ended the troubles and cares of the storyland, won't it be wonderful there? Won't it be wonderful there? Having no burdens to bear, joyously singing with our bells all ringing, oh, won't it be wonderful there? There where the tempest will never be sweeping us, won't it be wonderful there? Sure that forever the Lord will be keeping us, won't it be wonderful there? Won't it be wonderful there? Having no burdens to bear, joyously singing with our bells all ringing, oh, won't it be wonderful there? You know, that's one of the consequences of singing in a bunch of different congregations. You can't keep up with who knows what. Evidently, 550 is not. We do now. We do now.
We used to sing it years ago.
Yeah, too. It's hard to imagine many songs in this book that at some point didn't find their way in here. I'm going to keep introducing a new one every few weeks just to, keep us on our toes. All right, we are Matthew, the 14th chapter. I don't know how you guys feel about the rain. Now, I did comment this morning that I'm ready for winter to be past. All that week in Arkansas, it was frigid, cold, and rainy the whole time. Here it is today, rainy and chilly and all that. But I tell you what, it was perfect napping weather. The lights down there in the living room, that couch was extra soft, and there was some snoring happening. It was nice. That rain just sort of kicked it up a notch right there. So in that respect, rain was very nice this afternoon. I hope that you got some rest. I'm glad that you're here. You'll be driving home in the rain, it looks like, but perhaps it'll let off and we'll have a sunny week. That'd be real nice. All right, here in chapter 14, Matthew has switched gears, and he did it at the end of chapter 13, really, but we had Sabbath conflict in chapter 12, Jesus and the Pharisees, all kinds of back and forth, right? Pharisees, you're healing on the Sabbath day. Your disciples are plugging heads of grain on the Sabbath day. They're doing what's unlawful. It wasn't really unlawful so much as it was, it broke their traditions. And then chapter 13, Jesus starts teaching his disciples about why some people receive the gospel of the kingdom, why some don't, such as the Pharisees he's conflicting with. But in 14, or the end of 13, Matthew switches gears. He leaves the discourse, Jesus teaching the parables, and he goes back to more of a narrative. And then he does so here is using Jesus' rejection at Nazareth, gives an example of people not receiving the gospel of the kingdom, rejecting Jesus. And so we keep sort of churning here in chapter 14, and I'll show you what I mean. At that time, verse 1, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus. Now, just pause right there. We hadn't even ended the sentence yet. We got the first verse down, still in the first sentence here. This is the reason for the writing. What follows just helps us understand Jesus' response. Matthew is doing the thing that Matthew has done from the very beginning. He's demonstrating this Jesus of Nazareth to be the Messiah. He does it through demonstrating Jesus fulfilling prophecy. This was to fulfill the prophecy. This is to fill the prophets. This is to fill what the prophets have said concerning. And that's what Matthew's done. Then he demonstrates it through Jesus' wise teaching, the discourse sections, and through signs, miracles that Jesus performs. So Matthew is continually demonstrating Jesus to be the Messiah, and that hasn't changed. But he's switching from one block of information to another, and this is the gear, right? This is where he's catching the gear and going to lean into the narrative part of the story. And it's facilitated by Jesus getting on the radar of the ruler of the territory Jesus has been doing his ministry in, around Galilee. And so Herod Antipas, the tetrarch, he rules the region around the Sea of Galilee, a little bit further south down the Jordan River Valley. And that's his area. He owns it. Herod the Great, he had all of it. After he died, they divided it up into a tetrarchy, and you've got Herod Antipas and Philip, and the really, really off his rocker guy. What was his name? Trying to think of the third tetrarch. It'll come to me while I'm talking here in a minute, probably. So, Jesus is now on the radar of the ruler. Now, Herod Antipas is the son of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was Jewish. He was familiar with Jewish tradition. Now, he may have had some Jewish blood in him by marriage, Herod the Great, and therefore Herod Antipas, they're familiar with Jewish customs. That's kind of how Herod the Great got away with so much, such as, rebuilding the temple and making it bigger and greater and all that. Gave him favor of the Jews, even though he was very much mistreating them all along the way as well. He was very senile, as it were, especially toward the end. And his son here is familiar, right? And we see here in verse 2 that he's at least familiar with the concept of resurrection. So maybe Herod the Great, maybe Herod Antipas here, maybe they have Pharisaic leanings, right, since he believes in a resurrection. But his claim in verse 2 is this is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead, and that's why these miraculous powers are at work in him. He's hearing about these things Jesus is doing, and this has got to be John the Baptist, right? Well, I don't know how you guys feel about flashbacks in movies. Now, Tammy and I, sometimes you're watching a movie and it's moving along, and then all of a sudden they break continuity doing flashback. They don't tell you, they just do it. They just break back and do a flashback, give you a little bit of information, then they fast forward again, right back up to current time, a little bit more story, then flashback again, get a little bit more of that story. So they're running two stories parallel to one another. You got the main story going on here, the flashback story coming on here, and we just keep bouncing between the two, and it can get frustrating, can't it? It can. Hard to keep up with at times. This is a flashback. We're getting the backstory. Why does Herod think this might be John coming back from the dead, performing these miracles? This is what's putting Jesus on Herod's radar, right? This is why Jesus is coming before the throne of Herod. Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother, Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, it's unlawful for you to have her. And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. And prompted by her mother, she said, give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter. The king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guest, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took the body and buried it. They went and told Jesus. All right, so it's a little backstory. Not quite as much detail here as, say, over in Luke. We find out actually the daughter's name that danced for Herod Antipas was Salome, and you don't even get Antipas here, you just get Herod. So Get more details over in Luke's gospel. But we get the idea. Because Herod Antipas, Jewish, he's breaking the law. He's taking his brother's wife as his own. John's speaking out against it. This is wrong. And what's the punishment for adultery? For the adulterer and the adulteress, you remember? What is it? Death. Death. It's a death penalty. They don't like it. They don't like John preaching against it, talking about it. From what we hear and see of John in the text of Scripture, while a limited scope, he seems to be a pretty forthright guy. Guy's just going to kind of tell it like it is. He kind of comes across that way, doesn't he? Kind of like Elijah. But Herod Antipas is fearful of the people because they view him as a prophet. It's interesting because this is one of those rare occasions where the people get it right. It's what Jesus taught, wasn't it? Who did you come out here to see? A reed shaken by the wind? Who did you come out to see? And he winds up his discourse on John the Baptist by saying, if you can hear it, he is Elijah. So yeah, he is a prophet. And Herod Antipas was rightly afraid. He should have been. But he has him in prison. He doesn't want to have him killed because he's afraid of the reaction of the people. And we have the scenario that changes the course of his thinking concerning John the Baptist. His birthday party coming. Now, this kind of party that we're looking at here, where you have Salome coming out and dancing in front of Herod, it's sort of an echo towards what's happening in Babylon several centuries later, doesn't it? Several centuries earlier, I said that wrong. Looking back, thinking about Xerxes and how women were brought in before him at his parties. Daniel, same thing with Daniel. This was not a normal Jewish event or party. It has been corrupted into something that you would see the foreign people do. This is not Jewish. What's going on at this party is debauchery. It's right here in verse 6, even just by itself, the fact that Salome, a princess, comes in to dance before Herodias and his friends is way out of order. Way out of order. Princesses didn't do that. That was beneath their station in life. Hired dancers, hired women would be brought in to do this, to perform this act. And this whole situation here where she dances before Herod, there's far more intended here than the brevity of the text might suggest. This is his stepdaughter. She is probably between 12 and 14 years old, which for us that's absurd. Here, Jesus' mother Mary may have been somewhere in that neighborhood of age too. It's still very contrary to the current cultural ethic of the day. This situation here is just wrong on a bunch of levels, right? And then Herod, caught up in the moment, right? Whatever you ask for, right? Whatever you want. He makes an oath. And in this culture, this honor-shame culture, he cannot deny her. Once he makes this oath to give her what she asks, he is bound to it. To not do it would bring shame on him that might cause him to lose his office and his station in life. This is a big deal. The interesting thing here, I find it interesting that we see Salome. She could have asked for whatever, right? She could have asked for a position in the kingdom. She could have asked for wealth, land, whatever. She could have asked for a number of things. She goes to her mother. I think that's wonderful in and of itself, right? We like it when our children call us needing some help, some advice. I got this decision coming up, and Mom, I need to know what you think about it. What do you advise? Well, the loving mother that Herodias is asked for the head of a fellow on a platter, right? I would just caution you against giving that sort of advice. Now, don't follow Herodias' example here. She could have advised her daughter to do something that would have taken care of Salome, that would have set her up for life. There's so many things that could have happened, so many possibilities, but Herodias was thinking of herself, right? She was thinking of her situation, and this is a perfect place to leave it. And bless her heart, her daughter is going to obey her mother and going to abide by her wish. Even though it's absolutely horrible, she's going to abide by it. And she does. She asks for John the Baptist head on a platter. Herod Antipas really has no choice. It'd be nice to think that he does, but the consequences far outweigh the benefit of overturning that oath. So he does. He's sorry about it, but he has to carry his oath out. He's got to do it. So Herod Antipas had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought on the platter, given to the girl. She brought it to her mother, and then John's disciples come and they take his body away and they bury it. And then here we come back full circle to Jesus. Jesus is in the first verse. Jesus is on Herod Antipas' radar. He thinks John's been resurrected. Now we've finished the flashback and we've come back to Jesus. Herod has heard about Jesus. He's performing these signs and wonders. It must be John the Baptist. But here, Matthew does something that I think is just brilliant. He disrupts the timeline. You guys like Back to the Future or any of these movies that play with time travel back and forth. When Jesus finds out about John the Baptist's death, this puts us on another timeline. Isn't that interesting? Matthew is telling us the story of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is the Messiah, but he needs to get from here to here. And he's on his way, and he goes backwards here, and then once he finishes backwards, he pulls back forward just a little bit, not all the way back up to here, and then starts telling again. We're on a third timeline. It's interesting. This is the timeline where Jesus is just finding out about John the Baptist. We started on a timeline where John has been dead, we don't know how long, and Herod's afraid that he's been resurrected. We don't know. We don't know when, and that's the brilliance of what Matthew has done. He has pulled us back so he can begin this narrative on the signs or the miracles of Jesus. That's exactly what he does. Now, this is a picture of Tiberias. This is where Antipas reigned from. We're up on top of a really, really tall hill. There's a palace. The Palace of Bernice is up here on this hill overlooking the Sea of Galilee there. But Tiberias is the big old city that stretched out right there. In the first century, Tiberias was just beginning. It was something that Herod the Great had begun as a tribute to the Emperor Tiberius. And if you wanted to gain the favor of the emperor, the Roman emperor, you built something really nice and put his name on it. That's how you get on his radar for good things, for good reasons. And Herod the Great had great favor with the emperors, so it was a good idea. But Tiberias today is a really, really big city down on the southwestern banks of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum would be straight out there and across from it at the far end down there that you cannot see in this picture. But it's pretty interesting to stand right here where we were, look out over the Sea of Galilee, the lake that it is, and see all these wonderful historic cities where Jesus' ministry revolved around in the early days. And so Herod Antipas, this being his region to rule over, lived in the city. And just about line of sight, keep an eye on most of the villages around the Sea of Galilee. Interesting. Now, that's really, really cool. So, we've started a new timeline. Jesus has found out about John the Baptist's death. And then verse 13. Now, when Jesus heard this about John's death, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. When the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. And when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. And now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." He ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. And then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd. They all ate, were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. All right, so the first of the signs in this section, Matthew leads us right into it. I said Matthew, none of the gospel writers, they don't write just for the sake of recording history. Gospels are history, sure enough, but they're on the task of demonstrating Jesus. Matthew, he is the Messiah, and he's greater than, right? He's greater than the prophets. First and foremost, Matthew has been demonstrating Jesus to be the prophet foretold. The Messiah is the prophet that's to come from God. So Matthew has been demonstrating that here and there. That's what this miracle is about. I could really condense it down real short. I'll do that in a minute. Let's talk about a few of the details first. One, he found out that John the Baptist had been killed, executed, and he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. As a side study, if you want a concordance, just look up the word desolate, plot it into the 4 Gospels, and just see how often Jesus withdrew to a desolate place to pray. It was a huge part of his ministry. He would engage and withdraw. He would engage and withdraw. He would find time to be alone with God, to pray, to recharge his soul. We would call it a mini Sabbath, if you will. He would pull away and practice Sabbath, focusing on God. All right. Obviously, when you withdraw to a desolate place to pray, to be by yourself, you're going to do that with a crowd, right? That's exactly what happens when you're famous and you're performing wonderful signs and healings and casting out demons. People want to be near you. They want to obtain a blessing from you. So the crowds, they hear that Jesus is moving, he's traveling, they want to keep up, they want to follow, and that's what they do. Jesus hopped in a boat, but they followed on foot, all right? So they're having to cover quite a bit of ground, and evidently they did pretty good, because when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, had compassion on them, healed their sick. So he was trying to be alone, didn't work out. Crowd is there. He's showing compassion. He's going ahead and doing his ministry, right? He's about the work. Evening came. I've never considered this a whole lot. You just kind of read over it real quick. It's a desolate place. It's over. It's setting up the scenario for the miracle. They're going to be hungry. We're going to need something to eat. We need to send them away. But here's the deal.
This is an extremely large crowd. Let's fast forward back down here to the end. About 5,000 men besides women and children. I'm sure there's plenty of estimates out there. Seems like in all the footnotes and everything, it could be 6,000, it could be 7,000, it could be 8,000 people. The problem is that these villages that are pretty nearby that might have some food, well, these villages themselves may only be 2, 3, 400 people. Capernaum, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people in population. There's no McDonald's. There's no Burger Kings, no Popeyes, no Chick-fil-A's. They're not pulling the drive-through and finding enough food for 5, 6, 7, 8,000 people. It's not really an option. What the disciples are proposing for these people to just head on out and go ambush these villages that are on the way back to wherever they're from isn't really feasible either. They're not going to have enough food to feed all these people if all of them are wanting to eat. It's not really an option. Not a good one. Jesus had compassion on them. Seems like that word pops up quite a bit in the text. Jesus had compassion on them. And he spoke over the 2 fish, right? 2 fish and 5 loaves. He multiplies it. You know the story. All of them have plenty to eat. They gather up far more than they began with. It's this wonderful sign. It's a sign of plenty. But remember, Matthew is up to something. He's not just sharing the sign to share the sign, just to say, hey, you guys, see what he did? He must be the Messiah. That's not all of it. It goes deeper than that. On your notes, I don't know why I did not put this passage on the slide, but I didn't. 2 Kings. Earlier, Jesus raised the daughter of Jairus, right? Goes to the room. She's sick. She died. Oh, she's but asleep. And they laugh at him. He thinks she's asleep. And takes her by the hand. Arise. And she sits up in the bed, alive. Healing miracle. We talk about Elijah and Elisha. Elijah with a woman of Zarephath. Her son died. He has to stretch himself over 3 times and prays over. And after that third one, comes back to life. Elisha, the Shunammite woman, and her son, he died. Elisha stretches himself over twice. He arises, comes back to life. Jesus just merely takes her by the hand and speaks the word, and up she comes. Jesus is greater than all these prophets that you've esteemed so highly. You have them elevated way up here. Yes, they're here, but Jesus is way beyond them in power and status. He's the far greater prophet. 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 42 to 44. A man came from Baal Shalishah, bringing the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and fresh ears of grain in a sack. Elisha said, give to the men that they may eat. The servant said, how can I set this before 100 men? All right, see, we've got 20 loaves of barley. I don't know how big the loaves are. I'm not sure, but it's something they're toting in a sack, so it can't be enough. Some fresh ears of grain. Whatever it is, it appears to nowhere be near enough to feed 100 men. And Elijah repeated, give them to the men that they may eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left. And so he said it before them. And they ate and had some left according to the word of the Lord. All right, so 20 loaves of barley, some fresh ears of grain that's unnumbered, and there's only 100 guys, 100 hungry men. That food is multiplied, feeds them all well, even so much that there's a little bit left over. Here, 5,000 men plus women and children with only 5 loaves, with only a couple of fish, and there's 12 basket loads left over. Jesus is far greater than whatever prophet, you name them. Jesus is greater than. It's what Matthew is doing. He's showing them that Jesus is not a prophet of God. He is the prophet of God, demonstrated through these signs. These signs mirroring the earlier signs of the prophets. All right. We'll put a pin in it right there. Do you have any thoughts or questions about this beginning section of Matthew chapter 14? All right. We'll pick up the next sign. Jesus is going to walk on water. Verse 22.
We can help you tonight. You need to respond to the gospel invitation. Won't you come as we stand and we sing our song? 226. There's a stranger at the door. Let him in. He has been there all before. Let him in. Let him in and he is home. Let him in the Holy One. Jesus Christ, the Father's Son. Let him in. Now admit the heavenly guest. Let him in. He will make for you a feast. Let him in. He will speak your sins forgive. And when earth ties all are in, he will take you home to heaven. Let him in. Does anyone need to take the Lord's table this evening? Bow with me for a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we are so thankful for the opportunity that you give us to come together this evening to study your holy word, Heavenly Father, to fellowship with each other. Lord, we're thankful for the strength and encouragement that it brings. Lord, we pray that through studying your holy word, our faith would grow, that we would more and more put your image on, Heavenly Father. We shine a light on you, on your love, on the gospel throughout our week this morning. Lord, I pray that as an opportunity presents itself, that we would be an encouragement, and we share encouraging words to those around us. Lord, we're also mindful of those who are numbered sick. Lord, for Brother Ralph, Sister Johnny especially, Lord, we remember him. We pray that you bless, strengthen, and heal, Heavenly Father, to restore their health, Heavenly Father. Lord, we pray for peace and comfort for them and for their family as well. Lord, while we have so many friends and family that do suffer daily health struggles, issues, Lord, we pray for comfort, peace, and healing in their lives. Lord, also for our loved ones who have turned their back on you, turned their back on faith, Heavenly Father, we pray that something that you said, some